70, 80.
So good evening, everyone, and welcome to an evening with Holy Cross Alumni Winemakers. My name is Sean Martin, class of '89, and a Holy Cross Alumni Association board member. So thank you very much for joining. We are delighted to have several class members who are wine experts or wine masters. Unfortunately, Maggie Wildrider could not join us tonight, but please trust that we will have a great conversation this evening with our other participants as well. So over the past several months, we've gotten quite used to Zoom features. So please use the Q&A function within Zoom to type in your questions. We already received a number of questions in advance, and we will be addressing those questions as well throughout the next hour or so. I'm very grateful to have my friend Stacy Woods, who will be facilitating this evening's conversation, and she will be a valuable contributor to our conversation this evening as well. Stacy?
Welcome, everybody. Welcome, alumni, students, parents, friends, faculty, staff. I'm really so glad that we're all in the comfort of our own homes on what is an absolutely disgusting Worcester night in March. And so hopefully you have something nice and warm in your glass and probably some sweatpants on. It's better than getting these guys to fly all the way to cold and rainy Worcester. So thank you very much for everyone who's joining us tonight. And a special thank you to Joe Donelan, class of 72, and my classmate, Clay Fritz, class of 94, for joining us on what I hope is going to be a very entertaining evening. I will just a little bit of housekeeping say that if you do have any questions, certainly you can pose those in the Q&A feature. Now, thank you to everybody, to the registrants who posed a question on the registration. Very insightful questions, which are really setting us up for a great evening. And I didn't really have to do a whole lot of work. But very briefly, I don't want to take any time away from these two amazing guys. I'm Stacy Woods, and I'm class of 94. I am a certified wine educator. I worked in the wine industry for about 20 years after I graduated from the financial industry and being a stay-at-home mom. I worked as a consultant. I was a student, a distributor, and then finally a teacher at the Elizabeth Bishop School at Boston University of Wine Studies. I did that for over 10 years and loved every second of it. But my journey in wine actually began at Holy Cross. And no, it does not involve a bottle of Boone's Farm or some horrible wine. But it actually started at Professor Bill Green's house, history professor extraordinaire. My boyfriend at the time, now husband, Jack Woods, class of '89, was great friends with Professor Green and his son, Chris. And we were invited to their house for some sort of a get together. And I knew that Professor Green was a massive wine buff, had a wine cellar in the basement, collected wines, particularly from Europe. And I was really eager to bring him a bottle of wine. So I agonized for probably a good week and a half about what to bring him, and did some research, and finally settled upon a bottle of wine, and then researched some more and read some more. And I did some Wine Spectator, and I did Robert Parker, and I thought it was getting so smart, but I was really intrigued by how much there really was to know about wine. And when I started getting more and more educated, my intimidation factor started to shrink. And I felt pretty confident about bringing that bottle of wine to Professor Green's house. And I was ready to give him a complete doctoral thesis on this one bottle of wine. And I handed him the bottle of Puy Fusset, and he put it on the counter, and he probably poured me something ridiculously remarkable. So it was quite the lesson, but from there on out, I was completely hooked. I'm still an avid student of wine, and I imagine these two guys are too, but I don't want to take any time away from them. So welcome, gentlemen. Thank you again to all the people that asked all these insightful questions. And one of the best places to start, I think, is if you guys could each tell us the short story about how you got from Holy Cross to the vineyard. And Joe, I'm going to start with you.
All right. Well, first and foremost, it's a pleasure to be here tonight. This is my bottle, and you can't see it, but up top it says, "Wine is a journey, not a destination," which really is a metaphor for life. And my journey, I think, probably started with my parents, who had a great appreciation for wine. My father used to go out to San Francisco all the time. I spent my junior year in Vienna, which I found out yesterday with doing a Zoom call with about 12 people in Great Britain, that Vienna is perhaps the only city in Europe that has vineyards within the city limits. So I guess my original parents, Vienna, I came back, I was in the banking business, I was in the paper business. You know, I met a sommelier in the mid 80s. He took me under his wing. I asked questions, the same questions probably too many times, but finally it sunk in. And then we took the road trip to Europe with my suppliers. And then when I got to be about 48, I decided the business that I was in was, the internet was going to destroy it. And fortunately, I had two choices. I could retire, which at 48 was way too young, or I could put together my bucket list. And I put together my bucket list, and it was people, wine, food. So I started my first winery in 2000. We made what we would call Rhone varietal wines. At that time, I was on the board of trustees, and I met the illustrious Park B. Smith Jr. And I proceeded to ask him a lot of questions. And being a bit of a rockhead, I listened, and then I did what I thought I needed to do, which he chided me for the 8 years I was on the board, and very, very nicely though, and pulled me aside and said, "Try these bottles," and so forth and so on. So, it's been a great experience, and I can't. It's been fantastic to be able to have an aspirational dream to meet people from all walks of life. And I think there's a little bit of a pedantic in all of us, that we all want to sort of teach or explain or share a story. And wine drinking and wine appreciation all is really sort of all about the story or the backstory, or what I call being inside the white tent. And I learned that first and foremost, visiting all the wineries in the mid 80s in California, and then doing it in Europe. And so I'm on my 22nd vintage. We make, for many, many years, we only made Rhone varietals, which were Syrah and Grenache, and things like Roussanne. It was only in 2009 that I started making Chardonnay and Pinot, basically because I think most of the people that make Chardonnay and Pinot in California, or that for that matter in the United States, for the most part, it's all about oak and butter, and oak is for floors and butter is for bread. But I am drinking the 2017 Nancy, named for my mother, which I think is probably more like a Pouilly Montrachet. But, I think learning about wine is like learning about life. It's all about experiences. It's all about sharing. And Stacy, it's like your visit with Professor Green. A lot of these people, they've got their own secret lives. Some people like cars, some people like art, and then some people like wine. And it's pretty amazing when you have the opportunity to have a great bottle of wine and share it with people, and memories start happening. And so for me, I go back to my label. Wine is a journey, not a destination. And and life is just full with new memories that are created every day. And I'm very, very
That's
pleased.
awesome, Joe. That's terrific. I mean, I think that's a big reason why so many people have signed up for this conversation. And wine is about sharing. And Clay, I want to give you a chance in there too to give us your story from Holy Cross to the hill to the vineyard.
Well, I guess the only connection with Holy Cross is I think it did save a grade one time when I made sure Professor happy and had some extra Chardonnay for dinner one night. But for the most part, I'm a little different than Joe. I'm a second generation winery owner. I got kind of lucky to actually end up at Holy Cross, come from California. There weren't a lot of us out there. I think there were about 4 in our class total, Stacy. 2 of us went to St. Nations in San Francisco, but so I didn't start out after I got out of Holy Cross to be in the wine business. I went out and then, it was the early 90s. Things were happening. Things were great. Started out in small startup companies, went in the tech world for a little bit, traveled the world, had actually a fabulous time, and started a company with 3 buddies. Around 98, 99. And by 2000, we found out we weren't the smartest guys in the room. And we had to move back to, I had to move back to San Francisco. At which point my father asked me, well, what do you want to do with your life? And I found out, I was a little younger than Joe, so retirement wasn't in the plans. And playing golf every day and drinking beer definitely wasn't in the plans at that point. So I actually went up and worked the harvest with my family. And I, like a lot of people, didn't realize what I had signed up for, but grew to really enjoy what we were doing up there. I actually did some farming with my father going forward, and the timing was perfect. Everything was right. I had a chance to get into a family business, work with family. I was a good 6-7 years out of college, so it wasn't, just jumping back in. And he and I sat down one day and he shared a bottle of wine with me. It was actually champagne that had been, it was the Tsar champagne. It was on transit from England to Russia during World War I. And the boat was torpedoed, and basically the whole load of champagne sat in the Baltic mud for about 100 years, for about 70 years. And he and a couple of guys brought it up to the surface and actually sold it. And we poured the champagne, and it was amazing to see a wine evolve in the glass as you're tasting it. And that was that sort of aha that kind of said, wow, I'm really involved in something special, something unique, something that's tied to the earth, it's got family. And I've been running with it ever since. I haven't looked back, and just love being a part of it. And like Joe, it once you get in the blood, it's really hard to get out, and you just want to be doing it all the time.
Like, can you tell us a little bit about, and I'm going to throw this question to you, Joe, next. Can you talk a little bit about your wine philosophy, or your wine style, and perhaps things that have influenced either one of those?
Yeah, for me, I work at a particularly unique facility. We have a 2-story underground winery that we built in the 70s. So we do everything by gravity, and that by nature provokes certain ways or certain flavors and profiles out of wines. One is very fruit forward wines. It's a very low oxidative process, so we're able to maintain wonderful aromatics. We pull a lot of our fruit from our estate as well, so they're all handmade. And that gives us a certain structure that we can do from a balance standpoint. But especially as it relates to, let's say, our Chardonnay, very good acid, very low malolactic fermentation, because I have a cold cellar. So I have a chance to really maintain and age wines in a way that not everybody has. So I tend to leave them in a little bit, maybe a little bit more new oak, but for longer periods of time. And as a result, I'm going for that long, lovely finish that I think you can get out of grapefruit when it shows itself. So
who taught you how to do that?
Site,
who was the influence there? Like, what? if you could say, you know, hey, I had this wine, what would you try to model it?
Yeah, again, I grew up in California, so I grew up with bold wines from the beginning. I did venture a little bit into France, tried a little bit of Italian, but time and time again, I came back to bold California style wines. So I would say very influenced by Helen Turley, what she was doing at the time. She was very influential with where I was. I worked closely with Mary Edwards as another, person in the business, and those two probably helped enhance what we already had on site. And then locally for me, it's the Raffinellis with their Zinfandel. I could go to them directly, similar vineyard type, similar clonal layouts in our area, and really kind of play with them.
That's awesome. Joe, how about you? What are your influences, and can you give me your wine philosophy?
Well, first and foremost, I would think that my orientation is more European. Number two, I think that Sonoma, where we are, is really perhaps one of the best places in the world to grow grapes. It's one mountain range away from the Pacific Ocean. So we have what I call an extraordinary opportunity. At 2:15 every day, the fog starts rolling over the mountain range, cools everything down. And that's just extraordinary in terms of what you want to do and how you want to make wine. I think all wine needs to have great acidity, great structure and balance. Without acidity, you can't have either of those two things. I think number one, the most important thing is the site. Site trumps all other, varietals and variables. And so for me, 75% of making a great bottle of wine is finding a great site. And once you find that site, you let that site really make the wine for you. And my winemaker and the vintage, they add to that. But for the most part, 75% of making a great bottle of wine is the site, which is very, very European in its orientation. And I think, fortunately for us, we're not going to, well, in my lifetime, we're not going to have the problems that other places are going to have relative to climate. So again, 75% site.
And any influence that you could sort of like tap on? I know you have a sommelier.
Yeah, well,
Take you under-
I think, Jean-Louis Chaves, Hermitage, Northern Rhone, Rene Rustin, the James Bond of the Northern Rhone, Côte Rôtie, Andre Perret, probably the best producer of Viognier in the world. These are artisans that have been making wine, in the case of Chaves, since the 1400s. I mean, these people are really true artisans, and they have extraordinary sites. And again, the site speaks to making a great bottle of wine. I'm very happy with our winemakers, but for the most part, they understand that my philosophy is finding a great site and letting that site speak to us.
And Joe, there's a question here in the chat and the Q&A that I think fits right now from Daniel D'Agata. And Claire, I want you to address this too. And it's about big business, right? I mean, we've seen the rise of big business in the wineries. The question is, do you think it's a good or bad thing? Do you see the trend rising or declining? What does it mean for the future? And my question, I'm going to kind of like boil that down a little bit and make the question be, do you make a wine, or do you guys make wines for the cellar, or do you make wines for the shelf?
Do you make wines for the cellar, or what?
For the wine cellar, something that you're going to put away, lie down for a while, or do you make it for the shelf, for your distributors? I want you to take this home right now and enjoy it right away.
Well, first of all, we sell 80% of our wine direct to consumer. Okay, and that's one of the first hallmarks of why I got into business. I previously, in my previous life, I was a distributor in another business, and the true mark for me is my two sons are in the business with me. We can sell our wines with more passion, more information, more determination, more persistence than anyone else can. Now, do we use distributors? Yes, because obviously the way the laws are in the United States, which I think is against, right, patent law, we have to use distributors. But for me, there's always going to be the big boys. Gallo, can buy anybody they really want. And really what they want to do is, their philosophy is basically they want to own all the gates in the airport. So from the standpoint, they want to be able to sell, the wines to the supermarket. Then they want to go, a little bit higher end. So they do 8 to 10, 11 to 15, 15 to 19, on and on and on. They can do whatever they want to do with anybody. They're at the end of the day, the buyer. The other buyers, big buyers would be, Stan Kroenke, who owns the LA Rams, and a couple of teams in Colorado. You got LVMH is definitely going to be a big factor in this business going forward. They bought 70% of Colgan, which is one of the cult Cabernets, and they bought a number of other wineries around the world. And Francois Pinault is another player. But at the end of the day, there's plenty of opportunity for people like us. It's a very, very high ceiling to get into the business. It takes millions of dollars to get into the business today. But I mean, you could certainly, start up a business and work out of a custom crush place. But, for me, it's all about finding great sites, letting those sites express themselves. So in some ways, we're farmers, but in some ways, I mean, we're, risk managers. We find great sites, let those sites, evolve. Now, your question about, do we make wines for the cellar? I mean, for the most part, we hold wines back. Currently right now we're selling, our Two Brothers Pinot vintage 2014, 2015. Most people are selling 18 and 19 right now. So.
And your thoughts, Clyde?
Well, I just want to jump into back, Joe. There are two different areas of the wine industry. I mean, when we talk about large scale production, when you talk about the Gallos and the rest of these, they have a tank that takes my whole capacity of a winery, let alone, a particular SKU. So it's always hard to talk in these terms. A lot of times, like I used to travel quite a bit. I built the winery up from about 10 to 12,000 cases up to a 40,000 case brand. I would travel regularly all across the country. I had, actually 60 distributors in 40 states, because in some states you even had to have 2 distributors. And it was hard because you kept beating your head against the wall. You kept butting up against it. But the one thing you notice is when you're from California, there's 50 wineries in Dry Creek Valley. And I would say only 3 of us distribute outside of California. So, a lot of wine never actually leaves the state. It doesn't actually get to all the people. But what's been happening of late is that more and more wines like mine and Joe's actually can get direct to the customer. And that is having a huge impact on how we do things. The ability for me to get a 100 case production wine to a customer in Worcester didn't happen 10 years ago. It just never, it wasn't worth it. It was too hard. It was too, the expense, and God forbid it was 12 degrees outside when they try to deliver it on your front doorstep. But as that has evolved over the last, really, I would say the last 2 to 5 years, Joe, you may have a good thought on that. It's made it easier for wineries like mine, like you say, Stacy, to concentrate on the things we like to do and we're really proud of, as opposed to just trying to fill a pipeline to keep, let's say, another customer happy or a distributor happy, because you can't run out of the wine. And I think there's a lot of evolution at that point, that the wines are really going that way. But in Massachusetts, you see just a tiny slice of all the wine that's made just in Northern California, let alone what's going on around the world.
I always call that the thimbleful. We get the thimbleful of the world's wines here in Massachusetts. It's changing slightly, but I know that this call is loaded with people from all over the country. So I'm going to switch gears just a bit. And it doesn't surprise me in the least that all these super highly intelligent Holy Cross grads had so many business questions and science questions, but there's I'm going to try and squeeze those in. But the one recurring theme kind of goes back to where I was starting with Professor Green, with the intimidation factor is how can the intimidated better educate themselves to alleviate their trepidation when it comes to wine? What are your thoughts on how people can become more knowledgeable and arm themselves with knowledge? Clay, go ahead. You look like you're ready to jump.
Yeah, we should all drink more. That helps everybody
Bravo.
involved. Bravo. You know what I did when I first was getting into the wine business? I grabbed a local wine shop that I trusted. We were actually working with them. And I found the person there that I liked, that was able to present things to me. And I just started letting them choose stuff. And it's no different whether you're at the restaurant or the wine shop. Don't be afraid to go out and say, I got $20. I would love a nice bottle of wine. And the more you do that with your local wine shop or your local wine purveyor, the more they're going to understand your taste, flavor profile. You'll start talking and your language will start to kind of come together. And when that happens, then you can start really looking into wine, because someone might say butter, someone might say acid, someone might say full bodied, and we're all conveying different things as we're trying to learn how to communicate with each other. And that's really, Stacy, I may be speaking over your knowledge base, but it's learning to communicate and talk about the wine where we all are understanding what we're saying. That is the hardest part. I didn't grow up with a spice rack that I had access to. So someone says spice in a wine, the first thing I'm thinking is pepper, because I make Zinfandel. That's my spice. But gosh, you go in the spice rack today and there's hundreds of spices you could be working with. And there are elements of that in all kinds of different wines, from South America to Italy to Spain to wherever. And that is, unfortunately, that's the rabbit hole you have to start working through. But I think if you start local, if you got a good wine shop, God, I mean, the amount of wine I've sold to the Medfield wine shop, because my college roommate was from there, and they just had a great selection. It was fantastic. But you could talk to him. He was very available. He was our age. We could get into what I'm trying to do with the wines, and he could then convey that to the customer base. It's, you can't do any better than that.
How about you, Joe? What do you suggest? I mean, you seem like you're somewhat self-educated here and just kind of.
Well, I think it's certainly evolved. I think probably when I started in 2000, I could be off by a lot, but let's just say that there were, 2,500 wineries, in the country. Now there's probably 20,000 wineries in the country. So, I mean, the market has really changed very, very dramatically. I think that, unfortunately, what's going to happen is places like Total Wine are totally going to destroy the educational opportunity, and it's going to destroy a lot of mom and pop, small boutique, liquor/wine stores. I think clearly what you need to do, and I'd never thought I would ever say this, because for many years I tried to sell them the paper for their magazine. I would get a subscription to the Wine Speculator, and I would get it only from the standpoint of first of all, it's really more of a travel log than anything else right now. But it sort of defines certain things for you, like there's Chardonnay and who are the Chardonnay producers. Now, you're not going to see our wine there because we don't give them our wines to taste. But I mean, you're going to learn a lot about the basic words that would go with Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc, or Chenin Blanc, or Cabernet, or whatever. And I think you got to start big and then go down smaller. And you have to understand that most wine that comes in, whether it's coming in from Chile, Argentina, France, Italy, it's subsidized. The government is subsidizing those wines. And you need to understand that. If you don't understand that, you're lost, because you're going to say, well, how can I buy this bottle there and I've got to spend X, X plus in the United States. Well, it is. That's where it is. But if you have an opportunity, if you have a favorite restaurant and they have a sommelier, or they have an owner that's really very, very knowledgeable, or you think they're knowledgeable, you can ask them questions. And clearly what's happened with COVID is all of and there's a tremendous amount of people, in California that sell through distribution. And with the advent of, so many restaurants being shut down or having limited capacity, a lot of those restaurants are never going to come back, which is unfortunate. But I personally think most restaurants have too many SKUs. And, in business, you need to turn, your price margin is great, but you make a lot of money on turnover. And let me just give you a factoid for what it's worth. Gallo basically works with distributors, and every distributor they work with, they have a dedicated sales force just to sell Gallo. And Gallo's stated goal is they want to turn the inventory every 11 days. 11 days. So whether they're making 20%, 10%, 5%, it's a huge, huge business. So every distributor that has a Gallo relationship, that is the most important thing to their business model. And it isn't 2%. They're making probably 20, 25% every 11 days, which is amazing. It's an incredible business. And ergo, that's why they've got tremendous amount of power to dictate certain things in the marketplace.
Right, and I think everyone on this call would, if we wanted to be wine snobs, we'd say, oh, we're not, that Gallo is what my mom drank, or Gallo is what my grandfather drank. But there's still, the cupcakes and the barefoots and the, so on and so on and so on, which, okay, here's the snob, doesn't hold a candle to what you guys are doing. But I appreciate that you both touched on, and Joe, I hope and pray that those restaurants come back, because the knowledgeable wait staff, that's really where you can get a lot of educational value. But I am going to switch gears on you guys again, because here is the elephant in the room that everybody wants to know. Climate change, wildfires, temperature swings, storms, weather, going green, going organic, from a business standpoint, selling wine, but also growing grapes in the vineyard. And I know, Joe, you have a tremendous story. So I'm going to start with Clay, and then I want you to go into your story. So Clay, climate change, go.
Yeah. Well, that's a big one. We were kind of well placed to begin with. So we adopted a philosophy that's called sustainable winemaking, but we adopted it because we already were doing it. We source almost all of our grapes from our own property, estate, or from local vineyards. So everything's kind of in the slow growing environment. My dad had the foresight to build a, economical underground building with 200 feet of cave. So I don't use a lot of electricity to begin with, and it takes the natural resources that we already have with our redwood groves, our water, to actually make basically about as green a product as you possibly can. So I just walked into that. As it comes now with climate change, we're still seeing the effects. We're seeing what it is doing. In many cases, it's made wine grape growing more robust. The more consistent heat, the degree days have actually helped with ripening. We don't have to ripen as much fruit because we're getting a more consistent product all the way through. So there's some benefits to it. But in the long run, it's unsustainable, and it will change the way we have to act and farm. And the idea is to be the lowest impact farming as we possibly can. As Joel, say, the site should show itself. And if the site is constantly changing, then we don't know what we're working with. If we don't know what we're working with, we can't get the best flavors and end product out of that fruit, because we don't get to change the fruit. It just, what we get is what we get. And we have to work with what's intrinsic to the grape to make it go. So what I think with a lot of people in farming in general, the climate change may have certain short-term benefits. Long-term, it's more the unreliability of what we're working with and not being able to basically adapt and foresee where things are going, because we have nothing to bank it on. We have no way of knowing how the final effect is going to be. So as the earth warms and we are looking at how the different wind is really affecting, in my case, it's actually wind, as Joe talked about with his place in Sonoma. I'm close to the coast. So wind direction has a lot to do with how the cooling effect, the fog, and how we're getting the moisture to dry on the vines in our area. And that has a big impact on how the grapes develop. And that's changing. That's something we don't know. That said, weather is weather. Every year is different. So we will adapt, we will work. But it's the unknown that's going forward. How do we continue to make the great strides that we're doing and continue to get better if we don't know where to invest our time and energy looking forward?
Joe?
Well, I think that, to follow along with what Clay said is, I think fortunately for both of us, we're in a very, very desirable area, being Sonoma. As I said earlier, we've got the fog that rolls in at 2:15 every day. There's no question about global warming is here. I think it's more of an impact right now in Europe, because what we're going to start seeing is champagne producers have already bought land in southern England, and they're going to start planting vines there, and they'll end up making some kind of sparkling wine, or I don't know whether they certainly can't call it champagne, but they'll be able to do something like that. I think that, everyone has to remember we're farmers. All right. We have one crop. That's what we have. And, we're dealt a lot of different things every year, and things come in cycles. I think the bigger issue, in California is the fires and the lack of professionalism and the lack of accountability, and the poor selection of politicians there seem to be, it's almost a joke until it happens to you. And in our particular case, we lost our estate property that was the oldest Syrah planting in Northern California in 2017, right after the harvest. And since then, imagine you got a sheet of paper and divide it into 4 quadrants or 4 quarters. We've had another area contiguous to the one previous that was burned. And in this past year, it hit Napa with a vengeance. And obviously, not to make a general statement, it appears to be more money in Napa than there is in Sonoma, because Sonoma is really what California was and is, for the last 50, 60, 100 years. But it's a real problem. They don't want to deal with, thinning out the forest, control burns. And it got to the point where the Newsom is basically, who's right now in process of being recalled, potentially, they asked the American Indians, what did you do? What did your ancestors do 200 years ago? Well, we did control burns. Well, I don't know when the last time they did a control burn in California, but I know they haven't built any reservoirs since Ed Brown was a governor. And without reservoirs, and collecting the snow melt, how are you going to possibly be able to, have the agriculture capital, which really California really is. So to me, there is climate change. We can't change that. Fortunately, Clay and I are in much better positions than Central Coast, Santa Barbara, and perhaps some parts of Napa. Call us lucky, but it's something we're going to have to deal with. But to me, the fire is a bigger issue.
Excellent. Yeah, and that is really on the minds of many of the questions here in the Q&A. And obviously, it gets a lot of press, and this year was, clearly devastating to, a wide range. But, even if it just hurts one winery, it's devastating. You know, truly,
Yeah.
it's, you know, got a lot of press out here on the East Coast and, you know, the winds and Santa Ana winds and so on and so forth. So, you know.
Those are in Southern California, Stacy.
Yeah, yeah, not
But it's
Sonoma.
true. I mean, you
Yeah.
think,
Yeah.
no, but I mean, you have to think of the size of our state. I mean, you know,
Yeah.
all kidding aside, it's like driving from, you know, Massachusetts, DC. I mean, you know, so when we talk about California, you are talking about a large area, and you know, Joe, I think, said it best. We're very spoiled in Sonoma County. We're in a bucolic spot that just has access to the sea, to the mountains, to, you know, you're talking about some of the best cheese and dairy that's been coming out. We can kind of grow whatever we want in the soil. The soil is so deep and rich. You know, I think we go down somewhere, some of ours, you know, go down 15, 20 feet, and it's almost pristine because it's only been farmed for what, 150 years, Joe? And even then, has not been farmed extensively in that regards. So we get to weather a lot of differentiation up here that you don't get in other places. And but I think there is also a reason why the sustainable movement, slow food, you know, everything started in Northern California. We knew we had an asset. We are trying to preserve it. We're trying to work with it. And we're trying to find the best way to also live with evolution. It's going to change. It's never going to be perfect or ideal, but you know, we do the best we can with what we've got. And, you know, we're fairly spoiled, but no matter what, California will have droughts. They will have fire. We will have fires. We will have water in certain places in the state and not in others. And the next year it'll be in another part, not in another. And that's just the nature of where we are and the unique, you know, geography that we have out here. And so we have to count our blessings, but you know, we do complain every once in a while when things don't go our way.
And, you know, I don't want to put words in Joe's mouth, but I think he said earlier that, you know, the site should speak for itself and it should probably speak through the wine. You know, if either, you know, if your wines could say something about your specific site, what would it say? I mean, what differentiates you from your neighbors, your peers in terms of wine?
You know, for me, it's not what separates my neighbors or peers. I think it's more generalities. I look more to, let's say, if I was looking at my estate Zinfandel from Dry Creek versus Napa versus Paso Robles, you know, where what the unique features are of ours. And for me, it's the berries, the pepper that we talk about, also the savory characteristic of it, the fact that we don't have a higher alcohol content in those. You know, and that is kind of indicative of some of the other wines. So on my estate in Dry Creek Valley, I concentrate on Zinfandel, Cabernet, Malbec, and Sauvignon Blanc, because those are the grapes that I think do the best at the particular site that I have. And you know, we've taken 40 years of grape growing and have gotten to that point at this. It's taken us 40 years to get to that layout. And that's why most people don't just suddenly put grapes in the ground and make a 100-point wine the first 2 years after it's shown up, because there's so much research, time, energy, and history that goes into what's going on. Napa wasn't Cabernet 50 years ago. There was a heck of a lot more Chardonnay in Napa. But over time, they learned what works, what makes sense for their particular appellation and their areas, and they kind of ran with it. Sonoma County, we have, Joe, what do we have? 13 different AVAs within Sonoma County, and they're all growing unique, different things. You know, if you're on the hills between Dry Creek and Alexander Valley, you're a little more Rhone-based. If you're going into Sonoma Valley, there are 6 different sub-appellations just within Sonoma Valley. And so you're always going to find the thing that works for you. And Joe, you know, he found the stuff that works for him. I find the stuff that works for me, and all the small wineries are doing exactly that.
Joe, do you have anything to add to that?
Not really. I mean, I think that the beauty is I go back to it, and I don't want to repeat myself too many times, but I think we're very, very fortunate where we are in Sonoma. I mean, you know, you know, Clay, I don't know. There's no doubt that Cabernet grows better in Napa than probably Chardonnay, but they make some pretty good Chardonnay.
Except for the one I'm drinking right now.
Stephen Spurrier did a very, very good job
Oh.
in proving out a few things about Pinot and Chardonnay and Napa. And so I think at the end of the day, it's all about finding a great, great site and letting that site express itself. But, it's like everything else in life. I mean, you find a great place and that you like it, and it's all about asking the question. There's no subset. I mean, if we break this all down, if the encouragement I think that we should give all of the listeners is ask questions. Ask questions of us, ask questions of your sommelier friends, ask questions of your restaurant friends. And if you have friends that, you think know more than you know, ask questions of them. You'll find out fairly quickly that some of them really don't know that much. But the reality is right now you don't know that, but you'll find that out in due time. But I think that, I said to a group last night, that the group from UK that I was talking to, I said, I would guarantee you that half of the people, if they could do a redo, they would do a redo. Meaning to say, if they could replant and not cost them a fortune and get the grapes immediately, they would have done it. But that's, it's, in our particular case, we have an estate property that got torched. So we replanted, and it's going to take us a lot of years. And fortunately, we've been doing business with a lot of people, since 2002, 2003, and 2004.
And that's a recurring question, actually, that, that needs to be asked, and it seems to be desperately needed to be asked. What is the best way for our participants to find your wines in their states? So should they go to your website? Should they go to an app? There was a question about what are your thoughts on Vivino? I'm sure you've seen Drizzly and things like that. So how do people get your wines in their glasses?
I think they should go to our website, and in my particular case, and I'm sure the same thing for Clay is, if you say, hey, I'd love to talk to somebody, I or one of my sons or Clay or one of his employees would get back to you. I mean, we want people to be engaged. We want people to be better educated about wine, and we want people to drink better wines. And the only way you're going to be able to do that is to ask people. Not to pinpoint. To me, it's like every business. There's certain people in every business that are very, very good. And as I've said to many, many people, as I said, listen, if I only had to be in 100 restaurants in the country, in 50 retail stores, I'd be very, very happy. But the question is finding those 50 retailers, because here's what happens in most retail stores. The owner or one of his trusted employees basically explains a wine or recommends a wine to you. You enjoy it, or as Clay said, they put together a mixed case or mixed 6 bottles. You go back over the next month and you enjoy it. And then what you want to do is you go back to the store and say, well, I'd like to get some more of ABC and XYZ. Oh, well, we don't have it. It's sold out. Well, could you get me some more? Oh, no, it's sold out. And they want to sell you something else. I mean, that to me is the most bizarre thought process in the world, because once you've established a relationship with somebody and they like that particular bottle, that's what they want. And, so many people, and again, it's part of, as Clay said, and I've said, we give our distributors X amount of product to sell, and, maybe it's an indirect way for them to, call us at the winery and become customers. But to me, it's, call the winery or send us an email.
Yeah, I think, Stacy, the world has changed a lot, as I had mentioned, the last 2 to 5 years. The ability to actually get the wines. I have 15 unique wines that never leave the tasting room, and so if you're not coming to the tasting room and trying or being in the wine club, you never even know that they existed. And so that's usually where, for me, that's when you really get the uniqueness, and that's why you go direct to the source. And if you can, it's great. I mean, obviously, personally, I'd love to have everybody here. I have a hard time making friends, talking to people, spending time on the patio, drinking wine, as you can tell. So
You always had
just
trouble
being
making
a
friends, Clay.
burden. Yeah. But, and that's the only way to get the real feel, of the place. But, if we can, it's great. Life has opened up a lot. It's funny how much COVID has allowed people to explore, try new things. And, just remember with wine, I'll tell everybody this, Stacy, you can back me up or not, but it's okay to make a mistake. I've bought bad bottles of wine. I've gone off of scores. I've tried things because somebody said it was going to be great. But the whole point is that's part of the fun of doing it. You have to go down that. You have to try Riesling, whether you're going to want to drink it or not. We're a Gruner Veltliner because every sommelier said that's the way to go. So when you go back to Chardonnay or you try something else you like, you'll, oh, now I see why I like that more and more, or why I wanted to go down that, try that different wine. And, the education, BU has probably one of the best ones in the country when it comes down to just actually the sensory learning about wines. It really is a great location. It's sometimes we get too tied up in the technical and not enough into why are we enjoying this lovely natural product that goes with wine, that goes with food, goes with energy, goes with, people. I mean, it really is a great product, and it's as old as time immortal. You can't get anything that hasn't evolved. I mean, you got a 6,000 year history that we know of, with this product. So, I mean, it can only get better and keep growing.
Great point. So I just have a couple of loose end questions here in the Q&A. This is from Rick Bell's class. Joe and Clay, thanks for the stimulating discussion. I'm assuming you guys both know Mike Benzinger, class of 73, and I'm sure your paths cross. And Rick is also class of 1973. So hi from him. We just
I'll let those New Yorkers do anything, you know that, right?
We just have a couple of minutes left, and I'll just have a couple little bit of housekeeping things. But for everybody on out there, this is being recorded and will be emailed to all of the registrants, and we will include the website links for Fritz Family Wines and Donelan Wines as well. So, and I see that Sean just put the Donelan Wines up in the chat, and Fritz, you're just gonna have to wait. But but this is my question. Going forward, I mean, you always have to keep moving forward, and you're always going to have to keep growing. I'm wondering what's next for you guys. I mean, is it experimental? Are you experimenting with different varieties, particularly as it attains, as we're talking about the climate change? Are you growing? Are you shrinking? What's next for you guys?
I've actually been shrinking. I've seen the big one. Unfortunately, going to Holy Cross makes you think you can do anything. So I've owned 3 wine bars. I did one in Hong Kong. I've had multiple brands. I've flitted in a lot of different aspects of the wine world. I actually had to go back to school for a little bit. I went to Sonoma State and took a business class, which is the worst thing you can do as wine guys, take a business class. As Joe will tell you, it makes too many things look too bad. But I've actually come down a little bit, focused. It also fits my lifestyle with family, what I'm trying to do, be a little closer to the property, spend more time in the vineyard. I'm actually at the point now where I've got 30 and 40-year-old vines, so I'm retooling the vineyards, to update. Joe, you were saying, be able to do it again. Well, I'm working on that right now. And it's been a wonderful sort of change of pace and style. I may grow back up again a little bit, but for me, it's been get a little bit back to what made us unique and, stay a little closer to home. And it's worked out very well for me.
And you, Joe?
Well, I think that, what Clay said is very, very important. My original goal was, people. So I wanted to sell 75 to 80% of the wine direct. Not that I don't have enough friends, but I think I was very, very fortunate to have great teachers. And I think that, learning about wine is all it's all about an experience. And how do you get an experience? You have to try a lot of different things, and you figure and you find out what you particularly like. The second thing is clearly when you come to the winery, you get to see the whole operation, and you get to taste things that, as Clay said, normally you don't get to see elsewhere unless you are part of the white tent program. And the critical thing is this is all about people. I mean, the wine is all about sharing. It's all about the experience. It's all about the journey, and how you make that journey is coming out and visiting and seeing how beautiful this place is. In spite of all the politicians, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous place. And Sonoma is really where it's at. And to Rick Bose's comment, yeah, that's why the Benzingers moved out from White Plains out there. The father did. And just for a little factoid again, the Benzinger family had that Baltimore catechism business. That was their business, the publishing business for years. But, Bruno moved every out there, and Mike made the wine, and it was just a great experience. And this is, and I and Clay would encourage everyone to come out and visit us, because it's really a special little joy, and it's a hidden little gem. And we're on the, we're not literally on the water. Maybe Clay is fairly closer than we are, but it's all about finding these great, great sites and letting the sites express themselves and sharing that. And we make some wines, 30 cases, 70 cases, so it's really the people that get to see it are the people that come out and come out to the winery. So it's been a great evening. Thank you very much. I hope everyone's had a great time. And if you've got questions, and Stacy, nobody.
Yeah, there was a question that I'm going to direct people to the next wine event Holy Cross is having. And actually, my roommate, Vina, hi, Vina. You asked a question about organics, but if you're really interested in that, I think the next event that Holy Cross is having might be interesting to you. Wine chemistry. So if you're really interested in the technical, right, Clay, right? It's like you can sit
I
there.
love it. I may have to be on that one.
But there is going to be a seminar on the chemistry of wine, which I have signed up for that as well, because I didn't pay nearly as much attention to the technical side than I did the tasting side, the practical side. That's on the 27th of this month, and that's at 11:30 with a chemistry professor from Holy Cross. And I will say that, again, this webinar has been recorded and will be sent to all of the registrants. And I think, we've got 2 minutes left here. I'm going to say thank you to you guys. Thank you to everybody that signed up, and, for Kristen Dyer for roping me into this, and Sean Martin for roping me into this, because I've actually really quite enjoyed it. And it's been great meeting you.
Stacy, just think of the strength of the class of '94. I mean, showing up between Kristen, you, me, all the people online. I love it. We're really showing what we brought after all these years.
That's right. So, honestly,
Congratulations.
Yeah, cheers to you guys. This was a whole lot easier. For me to be talking to two wine stars, is kind of nerve-wracking. I honestly could not even focus on anything at my real job today. So
Stacy, I have a question for you.
Yes.
Professor Green, what was his favorite varietal?
Wine.
No.
What?
I think it was wine. No, so I'm not sure, but I did get in touch with Chris, his son, who's in Hong Kong, and he let me know that they will definitely be tuning in. And he was definitely, because he ran the Luxembourg, the May semester in Luxembourg, he really, I think, focused on European wines. But let me turn that around. What's your favorite wines?
Go right ahead.
Mine? The one that's in my glass.
Darn, you
we can
took
go
my
with
answer.
that. Come on, Stacy, we've done this before. I have a love affair with Sauvignon Blanc. It's the first wine. We grow it on our estate. It's pretty unique to our little location. And so that was the first wine that I kind of fell in love with and kind of grasped onto. So it'll always hold a special place in my heart.
And Joe?
Syrah, Northern Rhone. I think it's just to be able to taste the wine, taste the minerality, taste the site, the rocks. Is just very, very powerful. I mean, and we try to emulate it in California. So again, it goes back to what I've said, site. But
And for me, it's actually champagne, because if you have something fermented in the bottle, you're getting a different product potentially with every single bottle. So for me, that's a great way to keep learning and keep exploring, and it's just delicious. Well, thank you so much, guys. I think that wraps it up for the evening, and have a safe flight home. And
thanks a lot.
Yeah, we'll see you in Worcester.
yeah, sounds good. Hey, that was good.
Bye-bye.
Good night, everybody. Thank you for joining
night.
us.